In a picturesque corner of Italy, a curious phenomenon is unfolding. Quaint villages and charming towns are offering up houses for a mere €1, and in some cases even paying people to call these places home. It's a tantalizing prospect, isn't it? The chance to own a piece of history, to immerse oneself in the rich tapestry of Italian culture, all for less than the price of a cup of coffee. But as with most things that seem too good to be true, there's more to this story than meets the eye. Beneath the allure of these affordable abodes lies a complex web of socio-economic factors, a tale of rural exodus and the struggle to keep ancient communities alive. It's a narrative that speaks to the very heart of Italy's identity, a nation grappling with the clash between tradition and modernity. So, what exactly is driving these towns to take such drastic measures? The answer lies in the numbers. For decades, Italy's countryside has been hemorrhaging residents, with young people flocking to the cities in search of better opportunities. Left behind are the elderly, the guardians of a way of life that's slowly fading into memory. It's a crisis that threatens not only the social fabric of these communities, but also their very existence. Enter the €1 Home Initiative. It's a bold gambit, a last-ditch effort to breathe new life into these dying towns. By offering up dilapidated properties at a nominal fee, local authorities hope to attract fresh blood to lure in those seeking a slower pace of life, a chance to put down roots in a place where time seems to stand still. But it's not just about the houses themselves, it's about the ripple effect that new residents can have on a community. The influx of people means more economic activity, more demand for goods and services, and a renewed sense of vitality. It's a shot in the arm for towns that have been on life support, a glimmer of hope in the face of an uncertain future. Of course, there's a catch. These €1 homes often come with strings attached. Buyers are required to renovate the properties, to pour their own money and sweat equity into bringing these crumbling structures back to life. It's a daunting task, one that requires vision, dedication, and no small amount of elbow grease. To the outside world, Italy is a land of dreams, a place where the sun always shines and life moves at a languid pace. It's a country that conjures up images of rolling hills dotted with cypress trees, of ancient ruins and Renaissance masterpieces, of steaming plates of pasta and glasses of ruby red wine. It's no wonder that millions of tourists flock to Italy each year, eager to immerse themselves in the dolce vita. But scratch beneath the surface and a different picture emerges. Behind the postcard-perfect facade lies a nation grappling with profound economic and demographic challenges. Italy's economy has been stagnant for decades, with growth rates lagging behind those of its European neighbors. Unemployment, especially among the young, remains stubbornly high, with many struggling to find meaningful work in a job market that favors the old and the connected. The situation is particularly dire in the country's rural areas. For generations, these towns were the backbone of Italian society, tight-knit communities where everyone knew their neighbor and traditions were passed down from father to son. But as the 21st century dawned, many of these towns found themselves left behind, unable to keep pace with the rapid changes sweeping the nation. The reasons for this rural exodus are complex and varied. In some cases, it's a matter of economics. As Italy's manufacturing base has shrunk and the service sector has grown, many of the jobs that once sustained these communities have disappeared. The result is a vicious cycle of decline, with businesses closing, schools shuttering, and young people leaving in droves. But it's not just about the lack of economic opportunities. There's also a cultural shift at play, a growing sense among Italy's youth that the future lies elsewhere. In an age of globalization and instant connectivity, the appeal of small-town life has diminished, with many seeking the excitement and anonymity of the big city. The end result is a landscape dotted with empty homes, a haunting reminder of the vibrancy that once characterized these towns. According to some estimates, there are over 6,000 abandoned villages in Italy, with many more teetering on the brink of extinction. It's a problem that extends far beyond the remote, hard-to-reach hamlets that usually come to mind when we think of rural decay. At the heart of Italy's economic woes lies what some have dubbed the Italian disease. It's a phenomenon characterized by a business culture that prioritizes loyalty and personal connections over meritocracy and innovation. In many Italian firms, advancement is often based on who you know rather than what you know, leading to a lack of dynamism and competitiveness, and this has had profound implications for Italy's ability to adapt to the demands of the modern global economy. While other countries have embraced new technologies and business models, Italy has often remained stuck in the past, with many of its industries still relying on outdated practices and equipment. But the Italian disease is just one piece of the puzzle. Italy's economic troubles have been compounded by a host of other factors, from unstable governments and a chaotic legal system to massive tax evasion and a huge public debt. It's a perfect storm of dysfunction that has left the country struggling to find its footing in an increasingly competitive world. Perhaps nowhere are the consequences of this economic malaise more evident than in the country's unemployment crisis. For years, Italy has been grappling with high levels of joblessness, particularly among its youth. According to recent data from Eurostat, the unemployment rate for Italians under the age of 25 stands at a staggering 29.7%, one of the highest in Europe. Even for those lucky enough to find work, the prospects are often bleak. Many young Italians find themselves trapped in a cycle of low-paying temporary jobs with little hope of advancement or stability. It's a phenomenon that has given rise to a new term, the €1,000 generation, a reference to the meager salaries that many well-qualified individuals are forced to accept. The result is a generation of Italians who are struggling to make ends meet, unable to afford the basics of life, let alone the kind of long-term investments like buying a home or starting a family that are essential for a healthy society. It's a situation that has led many to question whether they have a future in their own country. And indeed, for many young Italians, the answer to that question has been a resounding no. In recent years, Italy has witnessed a mass exodus of its best and brightest, with millions of talented individuals leaving the country in search of better opportunities abroad. According to a report by the Italian think tank Fondazione Migrantes, more than 250,000 Italians emigrated in 2018 alone, with many heading to countries like Germany, the UK, and the United States. It's a trend that has had profound implications for Italy's demographic future. As young people leave, the country's population is rapidly aging, with Italy now boasting one of the oldest populations in Europe. According to data from Istat, the Italian National Statistics Agency, the average age in Italy is now 45.7 years, with more than 23% of the population over the age of 65. This demographic shift has put enormous strain on Italy's already overburdened social services, with fewer and fewer working-age individuals left to support a growing population of retirees. It's a situation that has led some to warn of an impending demographic crisis, with Italy's population projected to decline by more than 10% over the next few decades. But the implications of this demographic shift extend far beyond the realm of economics. As Italy's population ages and its rural areas empty out, the country risks losing touch with the very things that have defined its identity for centuries. The traditions, the customs, the sense of community that have long been the hallmarks of Italian life are all at risk of disappearing, swept away by the tides of change. As we've seen, the economic and demographic challenges facing Italy are far-reaching and complex, affecting every corner of the country. But perhaps nowhere are the effects of these issues more keenly felt than in Italy's small towns and villages. These communities, long the backbone of Italian society, have been hit particularly hard by the forces of globalization and urbanization. Walk through any small Italian town today, and you're likely to be struck by an eerie sense of emptiness. Where once there were bustling piazzas and vibrant street life, now there are shuttered storefronts and silent alleyways. It's a scene that has become all too familiar in recent years, as young people have fled these communities in droves seeking better opportunities elsewhere. The result is a landscape dotted with abandoned homes and deserted villages, a haunting reminder of the vitality that once characterized these places. In some cases, entire towns have been left to the elements, their ancient stone houses crumbling into dust. It's a situation that has left local authorities scrambling for solutions. And one of the most high-profile responses has been the €1 home scheme. The idea is simple. Offer up abandoned properties for a symbolic price of just €1 in the hopes of attracting new residents and breathing life back into these moribund communities. On the surface, it's an attractive proposition. For the price of a cup of coffee, you could own a piece of Italian history, a charming little house in a picturesque village. And indeed, the scheme has generated plenty of buzz with stories of intrepid buyers from all over the world snapping up these properties, but dig a little deeper and the picture becomes more complicated. For one thing, many of these €1 homes come with significant strings attached. Buyers are often required to invest substantial sums in renovations and repairs, a daunting prospect for those without deep pockets. More fundamentally, though, the €1 home scheme fails to address the underlying issues that have led to the decline of these communities in the first place. It's a band-aid solution, a superficial fix that doesn't get at the root causes of the problem, because ultimately the challenges facing Italy's small towns are not just about empty houses and aging populations. They're about a whole host of cultural and social factors that have conspired to make life in these communities increasingly difficult, especially for young people. Take, for example, the issue of living arrangements. In many parts of Italy, it's not uncommon for young adults to live with their parents well into their 30s or even 40s. This is partly a cultural phenomenon, a reflection of the close-knit nature of Italian families, but it's also an economic necessity, with many young people simply unable to afford to live on their own. This has had a profound impact on the social fabric of these communities. When young people are forced to live with their parents, they often delay major life milestones like getting married or having children, and when they do finally strike out on their own, they're more likely to leave their hometowns altogether in search of better opportunities elsewhere. Then there's the issue of vacation homes. In recent years, many of Italy's picturesque towns and villages have become popular destinations for foreign buyers looking for a little slice of the dolce vita. These buyers often snap up properties as second homes, using them for a few weeks or months out of the year before returning to their primary residences elsewhere. While this influx of foreign money can provide a short-term boost to local economies, it doesn't do much to address the underlying issues facing these communities. If anything, it can exacerbate them, driving up property prices and making it even harder for young locals to get a foothold in the housing market. And then there are the broader cultural shifts that have made life in small towns increasingly unappealing to many young Italians. In an age of instant gratification and constant connectivity, the slow pace and traditional values of these communities can feel stifling and outdated. For many, the bright lights and fast pace of the city hold a far greater allure. All of this has left Italy's small towns in a precarious position, caught between a rapidly evolving world and a way of life that is increasingly out of step with the times. And while schemes like the €1 home initiative may provide a temporary reprieve, they are ultimately little more than a stopgap, a band-aid solution to a much deeper problem. In the end, the €1 home program is perhaps the clearest indication yet of the desperate state of Italy's economy and the demographic challenges it faces. It's a scheme born of necessity, a last-ditch effort to breathe life into communities that have been left behind by the march of progress. But it's also a symptom of a much deeper problem, a reflection of the vicious cycle that has trapped so many of Italy's small towns in a downward spiral of decline. As economic hardship drives young people away, the very fabric of these communities begins to unravel, making it even harder to attract new residents and businesses. It's a cycle that has proven incredibly difficult to break, despite the best efforts of local authorities and concerned citizens. And it's a cycle that threatens to have profound consequences for Italy's future, both economically and socially. Indeed, the long-term outlook for Italy's small towns is far from rosy. According to recent projections, Italy's population is set to continue its downward trajectory in the coming decades, with some estimates suggesting it could shrink by as much as 10% by 2050. This demographic decline will have far-reaching implications for every aspect of Italian society, from the sustainability of the country's pension system to the viability of its healthcare infrastructure, and it will hit small towns particularly hard as they struggle to maintain basic services and attract new residents in the face of dwindling populations and shrinking tax bases. But perhaps most importantly, the decline of Italy's small towns threatens to erode the very essence of what it means to be Italian. These communities are not just places to live and work, but repositories of culture, tradition, and identity. They are the beating heart of the Italian way of life, the source of the values and customs that have shaped the country for generations. Losing them would be to lose a piece of Italy's soul, to sever the link between past and present that has defined the country for so long. And while schemes like the €1 home program may provide a temporary lifeline, they are ultimately no substitute for the kind of sustained, systemic change that is needed to revitalize these communities and secure their future. In the end, the fate of Italy's small towns will depend on the choices that the country makes in the years and decades to come. It will require a fundamental rethinking of the economic and social model that has left so many of these communities behind, and a willingness to invest in the kind of infrastructure and opportunities that will make them viable once again. But most of all, it will require a recognition of the immense value that these towns hold, not just as relics of a bygone era, but as vital components of Italy's cultural and social fabric. For in the end, the story of Italy's small towns is the story of Italy itself, a story of resilience, of adaptation, and of the enduring power of community in the face of adversity.